Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be my team selection for Game Week 7. I'll provide a review of Game Week 6 and talk about how my wildcard has been going so far and discuss my transfer plans as I got 2 free moves available for the upcoming deadline. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, I promise to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Check all the links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DylanRCM, as well as my Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It would go a long way to support my channel. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. During the last deadline stream, there was a whole debacle and debate about David Raya. Will he start or not against Leicester City? Ultimately, it didn't matter much as Arsenal conceded twice despite taking a 2-0 lead at half-time. So David Raya only produced 1 point, his first blank essentially of the entire season. He faced Southampton at home next, so he remains a very good option for Game Week 7 in particular. You got some tough fixtures between Game Weeks 9 to 11, but Arsenal do raise their level for the bigger teams, and during midweek, they kept a clean sheet against Paris Saint-Germain in a 2-0 victory. So despite the disappointments in Game Week 6, I'm still very confident about David Raya. I'm still very confident about my defender picks, but they were terrible in Game Week 6. Trent Alexander-Arnold conceded to Wolves and also got booked to deliver 1 point overall, but I still like him against Crystal Palace and possibly Chelsea at home in Game Week 8. Then it's a visit to the Emirates in Game Week 9. That's going to be a very tough test, and I would also have a lot of clashes as I've got plenty of Liverpool and Arsenal players in my setup. Speaking of which, Gabriel was also another addition on my wildcard. He produced 1 point as well, his second blank of the season, alongside David Raya, and I still like both of them in the long term and in their respective positions. They're amongst the very best in those positions, but it's a big shame of Gabriel, and I think he could deliver some really big returns in the next couple of weeks, and Southampton at home is a great opportunity. And Arsenal will likely keep more clean sheets than any other team, so they offer great value despite going up in price to 5.6 million in David Raya's case, and Gabriel is now up to 6.2 million, and only the likes of Trent can really compete with him as the highest scoring FPL defender, or at least it seems that way at the moment. But my final defender in the starting 11 was Rico Lewis away to Newcastle, so I wasn't really expecting anything here, but he played in the midfield. Not his best performance, but during midweek, he was great in the Champions League. He got an assist for Erling Haaland, and it was just a great performance all round. But I'm a bit worried about his minutes now in Game Week 7 as he played the full 90 against Bratislava, so I'm very concerned about Rico Lewis, and if you do go for him, I'd highly suggest you've got that defensive depth to cover for Rico Lewis. The timing of some of these moves hasn't been ideal, as I sold Diogo Jota for Luis Diaz in Game Week 6. Jota started against his former club and got 2 assists, including a great cross for the first goal, which Konate tucked away, and winning a penalty for Mohamed Salah, whilst Diaz was very ineffective against bottom of the league Wolves. But I still think in the long term this move will pay off, but I'm just kind of hoping for the best in Game Week 7 because Diaz started against Bologna in the Champions League, whilst Jota came on as a substitute for the last half an hour in place of Darwin Núñez, and Jota had some injury issues throughout the week, but there's still a chance he will start against Crystal Palace in Game Week 7, and he could outscore Diaz once again, and I'd be very frustrated if that were to be the case. My second midfielder was Semenyo, who got 7 points against Southampton. No bonus points, unfortunately, but he scored the third goal in that 3-1 victory over the Saints, who are also looking terrible at this moment in time, and they face Arsenal next, and Russell Martin, the manager, is under severe pressure. He could be sacked during the international break, but with Semenyo, I still like him a lot for Game Week 7 against Leicester away, and he's definitely benchable against Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Manchester City in the 3 game weeks preceding Game Week 7. But my third midfielder was Saka, who blanked against Leicester City despite having 8 key passes, 4 big chance created, also 8 take-ons and 7 shots. He got 1 bonus points for his troubles because it was a great performance, but no goals or assists, while the likes of Palmer got 4 goals in the first half against Brighton. So that was very frustrating as well, and I did sell Salah for Saka, so yet another example of a move that didn't really pay off. But looking on the bright side, I actually brought in Morgan Rogers in Game Week 6, and he delivered his only goal of the season so far. So the timing was actually spot on with this one. I did sell Smith Rowe to Rogers, and long term, I don't see much between them. Both Fulham and Aston Villa's fixtures aren't necessarily great in terms of beyond the next 5 game weeks, and you could argue that Fulham's fixtures are already turning really poorly with Man City away, up next. And Morgan Rogers has Man United at home, which might seem tough on paper if you look at the FDR on the FPL website, but I honestly don't think it's going to be that difficult for Aston Villa should the trends continue from the last year or two. Rogers is still a good option, I think. He's definitely worth starting in Game Week 7 and possibly in the next couple of weeks. I do have 8 attackers essentially with 5 midfielders and 3 forwards, and I think at the moment it seems quite easy to start these players and not really have too many benching dilemmas, but that could definitely change, and football is not played on paper. My final midfielder was another positive. Bryan Mbeumo got 9 points after scoring in the first 30 seconds. I don't know how Brentford keep on doing it. That's 3 games in a row where they score within the first minute, and that's a new Premier League record. Mbeumo is still a great option, one of my favourites in the midfield, especially at his price and below. But I have to say, I sold Anthony Gordon, who won a penalty against Manchester City and got 2 bonus points. So ultimately, I've sold a lot of players this week, including Robertson at the back, who did very well. One of the only players I kept on the wildcard was Chris Wood, who blanked against Fulham, and I have to say Fulham deserved the victory. I don't think Forest offered enough in that particular match. Chris Wood is still a good option in terms of budget forwards, but you've got plenty of alternatives like Calvert-Lewin, Vardy, João Pedro when he's fit, Danny Welbeck, and Raul Jimenez, who is in excellent form at the moment. But Chris Wood, I'm going to keep for a little while longer, but once Forest's fixtures turn, I'd be very happy to sell him. He's someone I started with in Game Week 1. He's done very well for me, whether it's off the bench or as a starter, and I think Chris Wood will continue to be consistent throughout this season. There will be the odd time where he's quite frustrating because that's the sort of player he is. He's kind of feast or famine. He'll give you a really big return. It might even just be 1 goal, but he gets maximum bonus points. And then in other cases, he blanks and misses 2 or 3 big chances like he did back in Game Week 2 against Southampton. But my final player is, of course, Erling Haaland, who also blanked against Newcastle. His first blank of the season in the Premier League, and that's actually 2 in his last 4 if you count Inter Milan in the Champions League as well. He scored in midweek against Bratislava, but Haaland has maybe died down a little bit in terms of his form, and with Cole Palmer really coming into the limelight, there is going to be this debate about going for the likes of Salah and Palmer instead of Haaland, but with City's fixtures from Game Week 7 to 11, I wouldn't recommend that whatsoever. It was the worst Game Week of the season so far, and quite similar to Game Week 4, which was another disappointment for me. 39 points, and if I didn't play the wild card and kept what I had, I would have probably scored between 50, 60. I don't want to do the exact calculations because it does hurt. Erling Haaland was my captain, he blanked, and Saka, my vice, also technically blanked, so my overall rank went down from around 800,000 to 1.7 million. That is a very significant red arrow, but I'm very confident in most of these picks in the long term, so I don't think it's essentially a bad wildcard. Possibly the timing was a little bit off, and I could have waited another week to play the chip, and with Jota and Salah, there was always a chance they were going to haul. I knew that, but with Gordon and Robinson in particular, giving the returns they did, that was very frustrating in of itself. And with Salah, he would have been my captain if I'd kept him against Wolves. I kept saying in the deadline stream that for me, he's the best captaincy option in Game Week 6. And whilst that wasn't true, with Cole Palmer doing extremely well, Salah was still right up there and outscored Erling Haaland quite significantly. But let's now move on to Game Week 7 with my transfer plans. I've got 2 moves available and there's still plenty of room for improvement. We all know that football isn't played on paper, but it's difficult to see a better option between the sticks in Game Week 7 than David Raya, who faces Southampton at home. They are 19th in the Premier League table with a goal difference of -9, whilst Arsenal have one of the best defences in Europe and they're also challenging for the title once again. I'm very confident in this pick in the long term, even if it doesn't pay off in Game Week 7. And look, there is a chance that Arsenal score 3 or 4, maybe are a bit complacent and concede to Southampton. That could definitely happen, but I still think Arsenal have a great chance of a clean sheet to help David Raya win the Golden Glove yet again, and honestly, you won't see many better fixtures than Southampton at home for the Gunners. All of my defenders blanked in Game Week 6, but I'm still very confident they can bounce back and deliver returns this time round. Trent faces Crystal Palace away, and the last time these two teams met, Liverpool and Crystal Palace, a couple of months ago, it didn't end well for Liverpool as they lost 1-0 at Anfield, and Palace really put a dent to the title hopes at the time. But Trent is one of the best defenders you can find in FPL. He actually got 8 points in UCL Fantasy, courtesy of a clean sheet and ball recoveries, which isn't a thing in FPL, but the assist threat, the bonus points potential is always a thing with Trent, and also the set pieces where he could score the odd goal here and there, and also get some assists in the process. My second defender is Gabriel, and Drafthound do have Arsenal top in terms of clean sheet odds in Game Week 7, and there's no surprise about that whatsoever. If there's any defence you want to double up on this week, it would be Arsenal, and Raya and Gabriel is probably the ideal partnership, not just for this week, but also in the long term. And finally, I have some concerns about his minutes, but if Rico Lewis starts against Fulham, I'm very confident of a return here. And this was a 5-1 victory for Man City last season. They're going to miss Rodri big time, and Fulham have had a good start to this campaign, but I still think City can put them to the sword, score a few goals, and possibly keep a clean sheet. Going into Game Week 7 without Salah won't be easy, but the likes of Trent and Diaz offer excellent Liverpool coverage. I'm just hoping that selling Jota for Diaz doesn't backfire, with maybe the roles reversing and Jota getting those massive returns, playing down the middle and receiving the bulk of the big chances. But Diaz has delivered 3 double-digit hauls so far this season. Another one in Game Week 7 would definitely be more than welcome. My second midfielder would be Semenyo, away to Leicester City, but in the 3 game weeks preceding 7, I'd be looking to bench him and go for a 3-4-3 formation instead. And I think in terms of fixtures, it works very well with my setup. But let's complete this midfield with the likes of Saka at home to Southampton. He's a great captaincy option, and you could say the same for the other 2 midfielders, but I think Saka is a level above in terms of consistency, and also the fixture just stands out, especially when it's Arsenal who are facing them. So Saka can get a few goal contributions in this game, but his ceiling isn't as high as the likes of Salah, Haaland and Palmer, and that's always going to be an issue when discussing the captaincy. My other midfielders also include Rodgers at home to Man United. The fixture might not look great on the FDR, but I'm still very confident Aston Villa can get a win here. But it's worth mentioning that last season, Man United did the double over the Villains. Will that be the case this time round? It's hard to see it based on current form, but football is a funny old game indeed. And finally, I'm completing things with Mbeumo at home to Wolves, another decent shout for the captaincy, as he faces a side bottom of the Premier League table with a goal difference of -10, and even dating back to last season, that's 1 victory in the last 16 Premier League matches, so things aren't looking too good for Gary O'Neill. Their start to the season in terms of fixtures has been very harsh and unfavourable, and things should turn very soon for them, but I think Mbeumo can pounce on this, and Brentford might get off to another flying start and score within the first couple of minutes yet again. I benched him in Game Week 6, but there's no denying it. Solanke has to start against Brighton away this week, especially if they defend the sort of way they did against Chelsea with that high line. I think Spurs could easily score 2 or 3 goals, and Solanke could be involved yet again. At the time of this recording, he has goals in 3 consecutive matches, which also includes the Europa League against Karabag, but they do play today, so let's see how Solanke gets on. Hopefully no injuries on that front, and he can be fit for the weekend, and he has a great chance of hauling against Brighton and in all the fixtures up until Game Week 12 when they face Manchester City. Speaking of which, that is my final player for this team, Erling Haaland, spearheading that Man City attack against Fulham. He scored a hat-trick in this fixture last season, and he has been a bit quiet recently, only the odd goal here and there, which is still prolific. Obviously, he's very consistent, but he's not getting the hat-tricks he was at the beginning of this campaign, but that could easily change with those fixtures up until Game Week 11. My bench includes the likes of Valdi Marison, who's never really going to play, to be honest, Chris Wood, Mikalenko and Jacob Greaves. So the real benching dilemma here would be Chris Wood versus Morgan Rogers, and there's definitely a debate, but I'm going to go for Morgan Rogers with the home fixture, and Chelsea have been impressive recently, and Chris Wood tends to get his goals in home matches, although very recently he came off the bench after facing Brighton away and got that goal and a few bonus points in the process. You could argue Mikalenko and Greaves aren't too shabby, but Rico Lewis is definitely the much better option should he start, and that's the only concern really with my defensive line. In terms of the captaincy, I'm going to play it safe and boring. I think Erling Haaland is the best captaincy option overall, not just in my setup, but even compared to Salah, Cole Palmer, and anybody else you could name, like Ollie Watkins. Now, Salah would be a very close call, facing Crystal Palace away from home, but I think Haaland could really do well against Fulham, despite them having a good start to the season, and they're right up there in terms of underlying defensive numbers, like expected goals conceded. Saka is my vice, and in terms of fixtures, you could argue he has the best of any of my attackers. There's no denying that, but Erling Haaland is just that step above in terms of the ceiling. He's got the potential to score 2 or 3 goals in a match. Saka hasn't really shown that too much in his Premier League career. He's a quality player, but he hasn't scored a hat-trick so far, and hopefully the time comes very soon, and maybe Game Week 7 will be the occasion where Saka finally does so, but he also can get the assists and bonus points, we all know that, but for me, Erling Haaland is a step above for the captaincy. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and let's now head over to other websites like Drafthound and FPL.team to discuss all the other aspects about my squad. Check out the link in the description below for Drafthound, I'd highly recommend it. Their transfer suggestions for my squad include Mykolenko and Solanke out for Gvardiol and Danny Welbeck. Then they discuss Trent to Dalot and Solanke to Watkins. So they're not really favouring Solanke at the moment, which I disagree with. Also Saka to Palmer, which is understandable. And Solanke once again out for Welbeck. And in terms of the optimization tool, they recommend the following changes. They've actually got Solanke on the bench with Greaves and Mykolenko. And they've put Wood and Semenyo in my starting 11. Haaland as the captain and Saka as the vice. So on that, I agree with. But I think Solanke should be higher rated, and I think in the next couple of days they'll probably update these algorithms and have Solanke much higher up, because I think he's a decent option. He hasn't got any bonus points so far this season, but that could come in the occasions where he gets more than one attacking contribution. But you'd like to see a bit more in terms of baseline bonus points when he gets just one attack in return, because that really is the sign of a great FPL asset. Once again, I encourage you to check out the link in the description below. Drafthound is a great resource I've been using for over a year now. And now let's talk about FPL.team, the website which shows you your team in future game weeks, and you can visualize everything FPL related. As things stand, my plan is to roll in Game Week 7. I think it's still a very solid team that performed poorly in Game Week 6, but the wildcard is a long-term process, and looking ahead to Game Week 8 as a sneak preview, I'm still fairly happy with my potential setup, and that involves no free transfers being made in either Game Week 7 or 8, so I could theoretically have 4 free transfers in Game Week 9, and possibly even 5 if I roll yet again, but injuries, circumstances, and this international break will definitely play a part, and I'll probably make a transfer sooner than expected, or sooner than I ideally would want to do so. But David Raya would be in goal away to Bournemouth. That still looks very good, with Trent, Lewis and Gabriel forming part of the backline. Diaz, Mbeumo, Saka and Rodgers, with Chris Wood, Solanke and Haaland. On my bench would be Valdimarsson, Semenyo, Mykolenko and Greaves, but there are some fixture swings around Game Week 9, especially with Arsenal, who have tough games until Game Week 11. They face the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea and Newcastle, 2 of which are away from home. But overall, I think this team looks very good in the long term, and I'm also quite flexible and open-minded about things. I would be looking to go for Cole Palmer by the time we get to Game Week 12, as Chelsea have a great fixture run from that point onwards, but I think investing in him now is a bit risky still, although he is fixture proof and he's the only Chelsea player I'd highly recommend. I wouldn't advise you to buy the likes of Colwill, Robert Sanchez and Jackson at this point in time, and perhaps wait a little bit longer in that particular case. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, the potential captain in Game Week 8, by the way, would be Haaland and Saka the vice, but things could definitely change from now until that deadline. Thank you very much for watching this video and listen to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 7 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.